I'm John Gomez.
And I'm David Denault. Stand by for Part 3, Destination Mars, Remote Viewing, and Our Government Spying.
This is a special report from About Space Today.
Welcome and thanks for joining us today. Have you heard about people with abilities that can see things from the past? Well, our government called them psychic spies, and today it's known as remote viewing.
In the 1960s, the U.S. government was losing a lot of its top secret information, and they couldn't find out how. Through a quirk of fate, actually, they found out that it was because the Russians were using psychic spies. Well, everybody had a good laugh over that, but then somebody reminded them, yeah, but they're getting our information.
Well, it was John Cook, a remote viewer investigator, who says the CIA got serious about the Russian threat.
That if the Russians have it, and if it's working for them, then maybe we'd better look into it. So they formed a contract with a research group at Stanford Research Institute International to find out whether or not intuition can be used for espionage purposes, for spying. Come to find out it can. The researchers at Stanford settled on a methodology called controlled remote viewing, invented by a man named Ingo Swann. They developed it into a viable military application, and once they did, a long series of projects started, which the public now knows as Stargate. I won't go into the history of Stargate. Suffice it to say that we collected intelligence on military leaders, governmental leaders, plans and intentions for the... Anyway, at the end of these projects in 1996, the CIA effectively declassified the fact that the government had been using controlled remote viewers for collecting intelligence. When the information became public that the U.S. government had used remote viewers for espionage purposes and that it was scientifically acceptable, psychics of all kinds decided this is scientifically acceptable, and so we're going to start calling what we've always done remote viewing. Remote viewing is a science, nothing more. You might use the analogy that if being psychic is a vacation, controlled remote viewing is the car that gets you there. It's not going to give you more scenery once you get there. It's just a tool. It gets your intuitive ability to be put to use in a controlled, organized fashion.
John, let's talk about psychic spies and remote viewing.
Yeah, David, I think there's a bit of romanticism around the idea of psychic spies, trying to get a jump on what your enemies are doing. But when we get into things like remote viewing, I think that's where things get a little tangled up and the explanation becomes a little harder to understand. Remote viewing allows somebody, in theory, of course, allows them to project their consciousness to another point in space or time. And I think that when you have somebody that can physically do this, the possibilities are near limitless. I mean, there are things that we can learn about our galaxy and just our solar system from people with that ability, if those abilities truly exist.
Well, one CIA remote viewer, David Morehouse, says that the government has effectively used remote viewing going back to Secretary of State John Foster Dulles in 1953. The CIA called it Stargate Spy.
I'll tell you what I know. I know the CIA put a great deal of money into this program, and they did so at a time when they were absolutely convinced that the Soviets and the Chinese were running full steam ahead in developing this kind of warfare as an intelligence collection tool. They did so at a time when Gottlieb and Dulles and others felt that what was happening is mind control was now going to be the new weapon. The new battlefield was the human mind. In fact, Dulles, Princeton University alumni group, stood up and said the new battlefield coming before us in the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s and beyond is the battlefield of the mind. And then in 1972, the CIA let that sole source contract to SRI International. That's when the psychic arms race started. What was going on in MK Ultra was mind control. They were trying to figure out a way to build remote interject assassins, meaning just like in Manchurian Candidate. That is not far-fetched. And they had indicators that the North Koreans, through the Chinese, that they were working on these things. And that fear rocked their world.
John, you found an interesting story about the sixth man to walk on the moon during the Apollo 14 mission, Dr. Edgar Mitchell.
I did, David. And one of the neat things about Dr. Mitchell is not only was he one of the few to walk on the moon, but something changed in Dr. Mitchell while he was up there. And upon return, he began a new type of science and investigating a new type of science called noetics. And I believe that's something that we're going to talk about in future episodes of Special Report. But for now, just know that noetics deals with our consciousness. And whatever happened to Dr. Mitchell while he was either on the moon or transiting to or from the moon must have been so profound that he is literally in looking into a new type of science to understand our consciousness and possibly where we come from.
After we left the moon and started home, and as I said, my responsibilities were largely completed at that point. And so our mission was complete, and we were headed home, and I could relax a little bit. So I got the opportunity to look out the window, and we were oriented and rotating such that every 2 minutes, and this rotation was to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. So every 2 minutes, the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens came into the spacecraft window. And that's really a powerful experience because looking at the heavens from that perspective, they're 10 times as bright and 10 times as many stars as you can ever see from Earth. So it's an overwhelming experience. As I looked at this from my studies of astronomy at Harvard and MIT, I realized that the molecules of my body and the molecules in the spacecraft and my partner's bodies had been prototyped and perhaps manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. And suddenly that was very personal. Instead of being an intellectual knowledge, those were my molecules. It's an overwhelmingly powerful visceral experience and accompanied by a bliss and ecstasy. And I never had that type of experience before.
John, after hearing the stories about remote viewing and Edgar Mitchell's experience, what are your conclusions?
David, I go back to that old saying, I want to believe. I really do. I am, me, I am a huge fan of space and I love the idea of science and science fiction. It sounds like science fiction, but sometimes truth lies in fiction. And I think if we open our minds to these possibilities, we can reach limits that no other civilization has reached before. So I think if we temper our responses, we be a little more patient, good things will come out of all of this.
Well, John, I think our listeners will want to hear about the CIA's interest in Mars and Elon Musk's final warning next Wednesday. Thanks for joining us for Part 3, Destination Mars. And if you like our program, subscribe, like, and follow us.
From Florida Space Coast World Headquarters, for David Denault, I'm John Gomez.
This has been a special report from About Space Today.